Welcome to the ChrisInformation podcast. We're going to address the transdemic that has been sweeping our nation for the better part of a decade. And we're going to do it with detransitioner Chloe Cole on the other side of this quick intro. 2023, Vulture, which is a fitting name for an entertainment news outlet,
joining us now, Chris Cella.
For me on Capitol Hill and from the halls of Congress, he is on top of all the stories. Don't miss the ChrisInformation podcast.
Sometimes it feels like we live in an episode of Black Mirror, especially when we, as civilized grown adults, need to debate basic human biology. And in discussing how our institutions have allowed a profit-driven medical industrial complex to prey on vulnerable, confused young kids in the most gruesome ways imaginable. We are witnessing the mainstreaming of an ideological movement that operates exactly like a cult. And just like any cult, it demands absolute obedience, it rejects objective reality, and it's almost impossible to escape once they sink their claws into you. This is no longer just a fringe internet subculture. The gender bender ideology has infiltrated our schools, our corporations, and the highest levels of our government. In fact, the ability to acknowledge basic biological truth has somehow become a disqualifier for the elite. Just look at our Supreme Court. When Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was asked during her confirmation hearing to provide a simple definition for the word woman, this was her response.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No,
Yeah,
I can't.
you can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So you
I'm not a
believe the
biologist.
meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the
All right.
law and I decide. So I'm not.
The fact that you can't give me a straight answer about something as fundamental as what a woman is underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive education that we are hearing about.
I'm not a biologist. What's 2 plus 2? Well, I'm not a mathematician. It would be laughable if the consequences weren't so deadly serious. When the people sitting at the very top of our justice system feign ignorance about basic human biology, it gives cover to the medical establishment to commit atrocities in the name of healthcare. The medical industrial complex has realized there is a massive, lucrative pipeline in transitioning minors. Lifetime patients mean lifetime profits, endless prescriptions, hormones, and irreversible surgeries. They rush in to affirm and medicalize kids who are just going through awkward, confusing stages of growing up, telling them that permanently altering their bodies, that mutilating themselves is the only way to cure their pain. The modern day left is obsessed with playing God. That's why they love abortion. They wield that ability to take life like a god. And the same goes for the trans racket. You're playing God when you decide a kid can change genders because they feel like it, or that anyone can change genders because God doesn't make those kinds of mistakes. But what happens when, the fog lifts? What happens when these young people grow up, realize they were sold a lie, and decide they want to leave the cult? Well, they get destroyed. When someone detransitioned, the so-called compassionate activists suddenly turn very vicious. Detransitioners are maligned, smeared, censored, and treated as heretics because their very existence shatters the lucrative delusion that the medical industry has spent billions of dollars to prop up. My guest today survived this exact wood chipper. She was fast-tracked into medical transition as a young teenager by a system that completely failed to protect her. Now she is detransitioned and is bravely sounding the alarm to save other lives, despite facing endless attacks from the radical leftist mob of overly nourished blue-haired individuals and, of course, the disgusting individuals in the legacy media. She's a warrior for truth, and I am honored to have interviewed her last week. So without further ado, Joining me now to discuss the sinister nature of Big Pharma is detransitioner, motivational speaker, and someone who has been a thorn in the side of the medical industrial complex, Chloe Cole. Chloe, thank you for joining me.
What's up? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. So before we zoom out and look at the war Big Pharma is waging on our country, for the viewers who may not know your story, if you don't mind, walk us through your incredibly, your just journey of bravery and, really just something heroic, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. So, I am a public speaker. I go around the country and even abroad to speak at different college campuses, in legislatures, at different conferences, at churches, and communities just across the world. And my main area of focus is the transgender issue because I'm actually a detransitioner myself, meaning that I have been through the medical gender transition process. For me, it happened when I was still a teenager. So between the ages of 12 to 16, I underwent different drugs and I had surgery to remove my breasts. And I ended up coming out of it when I realized that one day I wanted to have children, that I wanted to become a mother, that I actually was a very feminine woman, that no matter how hard I tried, I never would actually become a man. But there was comfort and there was beauty in the way that God created me. So since I was 17 years old, I have been talking about what's happened to me, what's happening to thousands of children across the world, and within our own hospital systems in the U.S. And I am helping to create legislation and a cultural movement against what I believe to be a practice of abuse against children who don't know any better.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's, these people are taking young kids who are confused, who have a mental illness that until very recently was in the DSM-5 classified as gender dysphoria. But they got rid of that because they wanted to get rid of the quote unquote stigma. So the MAHA movement, was a large part of the reason that Trump won the election. Concerned parents tired of being mistreated by medical professionals, school administrators, whomever, came together and said enough. And RFK Jr. led that movement. He's now the HHS secretary, and surprise, surprise, Big Pharma is doing everything they can to expose him. They've been manipulating and mutilating and indoctrinating kids, and it's leading to suicides. It's leading to depression, a complete and utter loss of self-esteem. So I guess big picture, what are your thoughts on the MAHA movement? How effective has it been? And what do you think about this obvious, very coordinated effort to try to destroy Secretary Kennedy?
I think so far the MAHA movement, just as a whole, has been really effective in raising awareness around these different problems that we have. It just with American health in general, with the obesity epidemic, with the overprescription and the overdiagnosis that's happening in our hospital systems right now, where it's more focused on giving things out, giving out different labels, different drugs, rather than maintaining an equilibrium and a balance of health, which I think is a big part of what led to the modern transgender medical movement in the first place. And also things like such as our food supply and what's actually in things like the foods that we consume or the drugs that being given prescriptions for. That being said, I think it's something that we need to work on if we want to make Americans healthier. We also have to work on making things like the MAHA movement a lot more accessible. And I think that the movement fortunately is heading in that direction. And I am hoping that long after the Trump administration, we're going to be having this movement towards health, towards maintaining a balance between the body, mind, the soul amongst the American people.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the things that have been exposed, like, the red dyes, the not just like, aside from the medical industry, let's look at the food. And, the food pyramids turned out to be, a total lie. And, RFK is coming in, he's really just ripping the, kind of this veneer off. And, I think he's doing a great job, but yeah, as you said, there's definitely more to be done. It needs to be, these people, we need to be screaming this from the rooftops that stuff is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening to children. Um,
Absolutely. And I think that this administration's HHS has been incredible with everything that they've been doing, not just against the radical transgender movements, but against these other predatory practices in our healthcare. And they're facing so many threats of things like lawsuits right now. So it's kind of an uphill battle because this industry that preys on the American people and on our health is something that, I mean, they have pretty much every financial incentive to, and they're a lot of their money right now is really, it comes from this deception, from this predation on children like me, on young women and men. And so they've got their claws sunk into it. But I think that as long as we keep fighting just as hard, we are going to hopefully hopefully change the definition of healthcare as it's being seen right now, as just a bunch of codes and diagnoses, and more into
Right.
something that actually focuses on human health.
Yeah, you don't need to, pump your kid with 12 different SSRIs because they're sad. No, and instead try to figure out why they're sad and, maybe take them to therapy, do other things. There are so many alternatives to, these medications that are very, very dangerous and have side effects that are just incredibly, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, for example, I'm a former opiate addict, and I was put on Seroquel when I got sober to help me sleep. And I found out later that Seroquel is not a sleeping medication. It's actually an antipsychotic, and it's used off-label for sleep. So they were giving me an antipsychotic when I'm pretty sure I'm not psychotic, and all in order to help me sleep. And when I found that out, I was like, get me off of this. But I want to ask you about something, with regard to the transgender shooter, kind of this bizarre phenomenon that we've seen. You came out a few days ago, the New York Post reported, saying you were trying, that the media is intentionally suppressing the coverage of transgender shooters. Why are they doing that?
Well, I think that these instances of these transgender people violently acting out, they expose things that a lot of these mainstream media outlets and these transgender radical activists don't want any attention to be given to, like that there is underlying mental illness that leads up to transgenderism, and often is what is connected to those feelings of discomfort around the sex in the first place. And not just the mental illness, but the fact that on a systemic level we are failing as individuals. We are failing to treat their real problems. We're not focusing on what's actually leading to that confusion, but instead furthering it by telling them, yes, you are a young man, or you are a young woman, you are transgender. We're going to go along with whatever you want. We're going to ignore our own instincts to recognize sex, to recognize who you actually are, and against our better judgment as healthcare professionals, and let you decide the course of your own treatment.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the only form of mental illness where we actually affirm it and we say, yes, you are what you believe. It doesn't matter how much outside of the bounds of reality it is. We are going to go with it, even if that ends up with you being permanently maimed and losing function in your body. And of course, that's not to mention the horrific side effects of the procedures that they put these people on. These are, I mean, you're blocking puberty with drugs like Lupron, which is the only way that somebody can fully mature into adulthood, not just physically and sexually, but emotionally and socially as well. So you're ending up with very stunted individuals. And I mean, even for the adults, for anybody who goes on the hormones are something that influence more parts of our health than we even realize. And it's not just our body that it changes. It's also the way that it makes us think and behave and experience emotions. And so when you're putting an unstable man on something like estrogen, or a woman who is traumatized on testosterone, you can expect that there's going to be some behavioral and emotional disturbances. And on so many levels, we have failed these patients who need to be given real mental health care. And we're also putting these narratives around that, well, by we, of course, I mean these activists and these media outlets that say things like, people like me who are critical of this, even out of good concern for these people, are actually pushing a narrative of violence against them, that we don't want them alive, that we're rejecting their life-saving healthcare that supposedly is going to prevent suicide, right? Which I could get into how wrong that narrative is. But
Yeah.
they're saying that people like us are taking away their healthcare and waging a genocide. And when you think that there's a genocide being waged against you, when you're told that anybody who can see reality actually hates you, that drives you absolutely insane. And I'm saying this as somebody who has been on these treatments, who has been in these radicalizing online communities that have these awful narratives.
That is just it's so just mind-boggling how backwards and twisted and ghoulish just all of that is. And again, thank you for being willing to speak out about this stuff. But and you touched on something. You said this is the only mental illness that is essentially celebrated. Like, we don't see people schizophrenics being told, hey, you don't need to take your schizophrenia medication. You can go out, just go have a rally, a parade of schizophrenics off their medication and just listening to the voices in their head. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize that, but it's kind of the same thing. Am I wrong?
This is. So I think that for a lot of people, the way that gender dysphoria manifests is almost like a form of psychosis, because you're believing something about yourself that isn't true. You believe that your perfectly healthy body that doesn't have any sexual issues is actually a problem, that it's sick, that it doesn't align with your internal sense, this fictitious sense of your gender that is separate from your biological sex, and that the only choice you have is to go down this route that's going to cause you further confusion and cause you um, a lower quality of life down the line.
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
these are all,
oh,
I
go
think
ahead.
what doctors should be doing is, we shouldn't be allowing anybody who actually believes that or wants these procedures to go down that path, because that alone should disqualify you from making these major life decisions. You are not in the mindset to be able to undergo something that's going to affect pretty much every facet of your health from that point on, if you're in this sort of psychosis that makes you want to undergo these drastic measures.
Yeah, it's really tragic. Now, do you think these doctors do you think that do the majority of them realize that what they're doing is wrong, or have they deluded themselves into thinking, and not just the doctors, but like the school administrators who want to tell little Johnny, you can start your gender transition. We won't tell your parents. Do you think that they have deluded themselves into thinking, because as you said, the media is very, very good at creating a narrative, and again, it's like the literal opposite of reality, as you said, trying to make people like you out to be the ones who are perpetrating this horrific kind of stuff, when it's actually them. So do you think that they realize how evil this is, or are they deluded, or it's a mixture? What do you think?
I think that most of these doctors, these counselors, and these teachers who are pushing children and young people down this path really are deluded. They really truly believe that they actually are helping these kids and these young people, because they're told that it's a form of suicide prevention. And this ideology, modern transgender ideology, I think is something that it manipulates the natural empathy that we have. It's kind of riding on the coattails of the other parts of the civil rights movement by saying that this is a special class of people who are born a certain way and they have an illness, and that means that they need to have this treatment. Otherwise, they're going to kill themselves because of the sheer distress of supposedly being born in the wrong body. That being said, I also think that no matter how hard you believe into this delusion, we still have that basic instinct written into our minds of being able to differentiate between male and female. It goes against our human instincts to label somebody as transgender and to push them down that path. And as adults, we should know better than to delude children, and especially for these teachers who are doing this without any involvement of the parents, to think, to have that narcissism to think that you know something that the parent
Right.
doesn't,
You
or
know
if you
better.
do, that you deserve to, and that the parent shouldn't be involved at all.
Yeah, it's this horrific, weird mentality of, yeah, we know better. We know how to treat your kids, how to take care of your kids better than you. So just stay out of it. It's not your concern, and it's just, again, so backwards. But the
Right.
medical, so
And
the
there
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
there are parents out there who unfortunately are pushing this on their own children. I think that most parents who are dealing with this with their kids, they do so unexpectedly because I mean, no mom, no dad ever wants to have their child come up to them and say, I hate the way that I was made. I hate who I am, and I want to be somebody who I'm not. And that was the case for my mom and dad. They didn't really know how to actually help me. And they were being told over and over and over again that I would certainly kill myself if I wasn't allowed down this path. But I think there also is a smaller subset of these moms and dads who are narcissistic. They see their children not as little human beings to nurture and take care of, but as accessories to them, something that they can manipulate, something that they can show off to other people, and say like, "Hey, I'm such a special parent. I'm helping my child um, go down a better way of life, and helping them through this special way that they were born," which I think is absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it is, and that's a really good point, because I went on the Real Story with Riley Lewis on OAN and talked specifically about how celebrities have this bizarre, again, phenomenon of celebrities with transgender kids, and I think I find it very, very interesting that it's Hollywood, the epicenter of, it's basically Sodom and Gomorrah at this point, and that's the place where you have this kind of concentrated, like you said, I think a bunch of narcissistic people who see their kids as not as little human beings to nurture, as you said, but almost as these like trophies to carry around and say, look, so they can virtue signal their way into their next, Hollywood blockbuster or whatever they're trying to do for their career, and it's sick. It's disgusting.
Right.
Uh,
It's basically become like a symbol of affluence, either monetarily in some circles, or um, even just as a social status signaler.
yeah.
And I think
So
children deserve so much better than that, than to be wrapped up in the middle of all that.
they do. They do. So the medical industrial complex touts this study, which is from 2015. I just found out. Out of 28,000 trans adults, 8% ever detransitioned, and they insist that 62% of those cases were only temporary, blamed on societal pressure. Do you think perhaps the reason that it isn't higher is because of the actual societal pressure that kids face to stay trans? I mean, it's kind of like trying to leave a cult. It's actually exactly like trying to leave a cult.
Right. I mean, we could pick apart these studies all day and what they're actually saying and their methodology, because a lot of the studies that are focused around regret and detransition are very heavily flawed in the way that they're conducted, and they're like they're sampling, or the timeline that they take place in. I'm surprised to hear that that's actually higher than the statistic that a lot of people cite when I'm debating them, say at like college campuses and such. But I do think that
That's
it's
just the U.S.
probably
Yeah.
plausible. It's probable that it's that currently there are a lower number of people who are detransitioning right now, and there are a few possible reasons for why that might be. And I think that there is like a major, not just broader societal pressure to stay in this lifestyle, but there's also not really any social or mental or even medical framework for detransition. It's something that there isn't really any standard of care for. So doctors who, even if you try to go back to your doctors who are involved, as I did, they might not have an answer for you, or they might not want to even look at the mistakes that they've made, and so they'll turn away. I mean, I still get emails and physical mail sent to my home from my old healthcare provider referring to me as a young man, even though I tried with every single doctor I had to tell them, hey, I am not transgender. This never reflected who I was. I want everything changed back right now. And if I mean, with how much of a focus there is on the medical aspect of this, it feels near impossible to get back out of it if you don't have the support of your doctors who might have been pushing you to go through this in the first place. And when you do make the decision to detransition, in my case, I was a person who actually passed as a member of the opposite sex. And so almost everybody who I knew at the time, I was in high school. So all of these other students knew me as a young man. A lot of them felt betrayed when it turned out I wasn't the guy who I said I was. There were a lot of people who thought that I was actually like a transgender male trying to like live the life as a woman, and it was like very confusing for them to watch me go through that process. And even for my friends who were like pro-trans and like fairly leftist, I think the thing that I was most surprised about detransitioning with was how poorly they treated me. I thought that of all people, they would be the most supportive of me through this process, but I think there was, I think it showed almost like ideological impurity because I chose to question what I was going through. I chose to question the ideology itself, and as they were watching all my opinions change, and I think the final moment was when I had a friend who also was transitioning, and I told her, I don't think this is a good idea for you. You're going to get yourself hurt. I think you're going through a lot of the same identity confusion that I was, and I'll let you know right now, you're always going to be my friend. I'm always going to love you, but this is not the right choice. That was when a lot of them, that was the last time that I spoke to a lot of them actually. So with there being no medical framework for your doctors to follow, with the risk of being ostracized or even for people who lived undercover of outing yourself as somebody who is formerly transgender, it's something that can seem incredibly daunting. And
Goodness, yeah.
I think that a lot of people also didn't know that detransition was a possibility, or that you can choose to that you can make the choice to accept yourself and accept these things that you can't change, and you'll be just fine without it. I didn't know that there was a word for detransition until it happened to myself. But I think that with the massive wave of detransitioners that are coming out right now over the last few years, um, there's going to be a lot of people going through the system who are regretful, who have had harm done to their bodies, and desperately need help right now. And I think that the medical system is sorely unprepared for that, and it needs to prepare now with new codes, new standards of care, and to accommodate for these young people who it's led astray.
Yeah, they really do, and quickly. So you obviously, so you left, kind of this church of of trans ideology, and you were ostracized for it by even some of your closest friends, and that's terrible. I mean, that's awful. And I imagine you would think that feminists would support a biological woman choosing to go back to being her biological, gender. But I'm imagining you didn't get any support from like the third wave feminists of today.
So, I mean, I think that a lot of these so-called feminists these days, including those who are in my friend group, are a far cry from the women of the first and second waves that came before them. And
No kidding.
I think that there was some legitimacy to the original stages of the movement, and it's created a great increase in the quality of life and in the freedoms of young women today. But the later stages are something that I think it was around the third or fourth wave when they started to focus um, on intersectionality, which means
Intersectional
basically pulling
feminism,
like all
yes,
these,
yes.
yeah, all these different things that have nothing to do together. Um, and that's led to the woke mess that we have today with different things like not just transgender ideology but queer ideology, and I think like a lot of the DEI and the race conscious movement, because it's all been just made into this nuclear abomination of we're going to focus on what people identify with rather than the content of their character, right?
Yeah.
And so once I no longer had that ideological or identity purity, a lot of my old friends just dropped me rather than I thought like I was at first I made the assumption of like, well, they might just see this as another form of me being transgender or something, so they'll be okay and they're going to be the people who I can rely on. Nope, it was all fake. Whatever support they had for me was completely surface level. But
Yeah.
I also encountered some of they refer to themselves as radical feminists or trans exclusionary radical feminists or TERFs. And even a lot of them were very harsh to me when I was just trying to talk out. Like at the time when I was coming out of my detransition, I I still, it's not like I didn't let go of those unhealthy ideas of womanhood that led to me transitioning in the first place. And so I was trying to make sense of a lot of it. And even for simple things like the fact that I was growing out my hair or wearing makeup again or wearing dresses, they like really got on me about that. So it felt like, okay, so a lot of these women, I feel like it's hard for me to come back as a woman and not be able to connect with a lot of women who are my age or people who I thought I could trust.
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, just being, kind of stabbed in the back like that, it's difficult to, yeah, to try to reestablish, a connection and a relationship. And again, I'm so sorry, but for the people that you lost, the people that chose to abandon you, good riddance. You don't need those kind of people in your life, that energy in your life, and God got them out of your life for a reason. So
Well,
um,
I hope that I don't know if they see where I'm at today. I hope that it helps them to grow and reassess the things that they said or believed before. And I hope
yes,
that God gives them
absolutely.
that opportunity to sit back and think about that as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so you have organizations out there like, for example, Gays Against Groomers, and there are others that try to separate like the LGB from the T. Um, so how successful do you think movements like that have been?
I think that they've done a really good job at showing like, hey, gay people, people within the LGBT community, we are not a monolith. Like they are not all like-minded. And it's I mean, with millions of people in them, obviously they're not all going to hold the same um lifestyles or political backgrounds. And I think one of the for so long the transgender community has been lumped into the LGB, even though even as somebody who doesn't identify with either, I think that there's a very stark difference between them because being gay, there is at least some basis to it, right? Because you have this sexual attraction to people who are of the same sex or you're attracted to both sexes, whereas transgenderism is all it really comes down to is having a mental illness and identifying with that instead of trying to live with the things that it makes you uncomfortable with.
Yeah, and
And
treat the core and
being
treat
gay
like the
doesn't
core issues. Yeah.
involve yeah, being gay doesn't involve getting cosmetic or sterilizing surgeries or going on hormones. And so they're in two completely different worlds. And the transgender movement has really, as I said earlier, it's latched on to these movements that it has absolutely nothing to deal with. And it's a lot of a lot of my gay friends, who many of whom are in groups like Gays Against Groomers, have a lot of grievances with the modern transgender movement and how it's tried to hijack the LGBT movement and claim that these historical gay figures were actually transgender, and the history revisionism and how they're preying on these spaces that are strictly for one sex, like these men trying to enter like either like women's locker rooms or like lesbian like clubs or things like that, or women who are trying to force like gay men to sleep with them because they identify with they identify as men, and they think that they have a right to be given sex on the basis of their identity, which really I think that amounts to rape and sexual assault.
Yeah, I mean,
But
yeah, you don't deserve
yeah,
sex with anyone. I mean, that's a,
it's
yeah,
like
again, that's
regardless
crazy.
it's like regardless of how you feel about either transgenderism or homosexuality, like that's very clearly a line that these people are crossing. And so I really commend groups like groups of people who um excuse me, I really commend groups like Gays Against Rumors for taking that stand and showing, hey, we might be a part of this, we might identify with this lifestyle or as gay, but this is not something that we stand with. And we don't we think that the sexualization of children is disgusting, and we have no right to be pushing these ideas down the throats of kids who should be left innocent and shouldn't be going through experiences like mine.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, yeah. Let alone just transgenderism again. It's a mental illness, but to again just the ghoulish nature of trying to push it on confused young children. Young as 5, 6, 7 years old. I mean, it's unimaginably horrific, and I think bordering on demonic. Um, I want Chloe. I guess I want to wrap with asking you, for somebody who is identifying as trans, may have had surgeries or is on the medications and realizes that they made a mistake, but is afraid because of this media narrative that has been spun, and doesn't want to be ostracized and wants to keep their friends. And I know it's much easier said than done, but what advice would you give to those people out there?
Well, first of all, I'll say that it's never too late. It doesn't matter how far you've gone into it, whether you're already on some form of the drugs, if you're on the hormones, or even if you've had surgery. You can always choose to embrace the way that God gave you. And what is really going to guide you during this time is surrounding yourself in the presence and in the word and in prayer to God, because you need something right now, especially after being led down this path of spiritual confusion and warfare with yourself. You need that foundation of faith to hold you accountable in how you're going to move forward, and also to bring you back into reality. And you it's something that is going to be easier said than done. There absolutely is going to be difficulty that comes with speaking the truth and living out the truth in general, and the trials and tribulations that come with that. But you probably might be losing friends at this time. You might even be losing the support of your doctors, but don't allow that to scare you, because I think that moving between different groups of people and not always getting support for the decisions that you make is something that is a part of life for many, if not most of, or every single one of us. But the answer, I think, is always clear, because there is no such thing as being transgender. The sex that we are born as is the sex that we stay with for life. And no matter what stage of the process you are at, what is going to help you the most and ground you, and not just your body and your health, but also in your mind and in your soul, is going to be accepting biological reality. And there is an entire community of detransitioners now who have spoken about their own experiences, who can give a bit of a framework and help you process maybe what led up to this in the first place, and some ways of how you can get out of it. But it's not something that you have to identify with forever either, because the focus of detransition should not be adopting another label or another identity, but in discovering a new life, a new normal, and a new balance for yourself.
Wow, that was just incredibly powerful. Very well said, Chloe. I and just to kind of um, piggyback on that, yeah, just trust in God's will. Trust that God has the answers and that He will guide you in the right path through prayer. I know that it's worked for me in in the darkest moments of my life, I've turned to God, and it's worked. So trust in God. And I just want to say that, Chloe, I first heard about you when I was working at the Daily Caller. We did a documentary about you, and I think in 2020, or you were featured in a documentary in 2023 that we did, and I just found your willingness to speak out so, just so courageous, especially at the height of the trans movement when they're having, like a trans celebration at the White House, and just all this other insanity. And I just got to say, I admire you so much. I admire your bravery, and I thank you for being a voice for people who many, I'm sure, are just afraid of losing, their friends, afraid of whatever the fallout may be. And so people like you give hope, and I really want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time tonight and for reaching out and having this discussion. I had a lot of fun, and I really love diving into all these different ideas. So thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
Absolutely. Anytime, Chloe.
2023, Vulture, which is a fitting name for an entertainment news outlet, released
Joining us now, Chris Chella.
For me on Capitol Hill and from the halls of Congress, he is on top of all the stories. Don't miss the ChrisInformation podcast.